Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. If you have not, please go ahead and like and subscribe. All of that much appreciated. Always love to see when those followers, subscribers tick up. Certainly makes doing this feel like I'm reaching the people that it needs to reach. So today I'm talking about radical acceptance. The idea of radical acceptance is it's one that's sort of antithetical to our Western ways of thinking. Radical acceptance can feel like a pejorative term often in our culture. It's the idea that we're going to embrace reality as it is, without denial, without reservation, without judgment, without resentment. That's often very, very difficult because the things that happen to us are often feel unacceptable. And something that happened to me very, very recently was I was doing one of my favorite things down here in Costa Rica. I was surfing. Been surfing for a very long time, and had a freak accident. And a surfboard came up and hit me in the face and split me wide open. I've played hockey all my life and been involved in martial arts, and so I've had lacerations on my face from time to time. So I just figured, of course, it wouldn't be a big deal, that I would just get some stitches and we'll be fine. And the board hit me here and opened me up pretty good, and it was bleeding pretty good. My wife said later, she goes, I was just glad that there was so much blood I couldn't tell how bad it really was, because when we got to the doctor turned to me and said, this is bad. And I did not love the look on his face, to be perfectly honest with you. I was, well, how bad is it? And he said, the functionality of your mouth is in question. There's a circular muscle on both sides of your mouth, and you've cut through the majority of this one, so we're going to see. And it was in that moment that I had to practice radical acceptance. This was what it was. The isness of life was where it was. There was no changing it. What was done was done. I had to learn to accept that moment, in that moment, without resistance. Of course, my inner critic came up and was like, this is stupid. How could you do this? Come on. Why me? Why this now? You're down here surfing in this beautiful place, living a dream, and then this has to happen. I took that breath, and the practice that I have in those moments is to say, and this too. It's a meditative practice that when something's going on that, for me, that's not to my liking, something that I don't particularly love, I practice saying to myself, and this too. And with every stitch, it was a practice in radical acceptance. This is where life had taken me. And it was interesting because the doctor then said to me, he said, I know this would never have happened had you been on your couch. And I thought that was an interesting thing to say, because he was sort of alluding to the idea that if I had been playing it safe, if I hadn't been living my life, if I hadn't been doing the thing that I love so much, this would not have happened. I would have been safe from this. In that moment, I had to do what we do with radical acceptance, which is deeply acknowledge and welcome every part of myself and every part of this experience, so that I didn't go down some spiral, some shame hole. This practice draws upon our skills in mindfulness and also self-compassion. It creates, when we're able to put those things together, it creates a mindset that shifts from struggling with whatever the moment has provided, whatever life has provided. We go from that mindset of struggle to a mindset of peace, and an attempt to understand what it is we're going through and perhaps why we're going through it. And so when I think of radical acceptance, I think of the lotus flower. The lotus flower is an image that we see probably used too much in Eastern traditions. We see it on the door of every yoga studio you can think of. But radical acceptance is the idea that without the mud, there is no flower. That's the image of the lotus flower, right? The flower comes from the unthinkable, the dark, the dank, the stink, the stuff that no one wants to deal with. That's where the flower comes from. Just to round out that story, he stitched me up. I ended up taking it in total 18 stitches, 12 in my face. And he did a very good job, and the functionality of my mouth is what it is. I do have a rather sizable scar that you probably can't see from here to here, that I will probably have for the rest of my life. And radical acceptance is learning to radically accept that, I could go with the idea that I've been disfigured. Okay. My son said to me the other day, he's like, Dad, that scar is really cool. Radically accepting is understanding that, yeah, my face has changed. But the lesson, of course, has been learned. The question I came up with in my radical acceptance, and this is the thing that radical acceptance can bring to us, is not why did this happen to me, but why is this happening now? What is the lesson? What is the understanding that I need to come to? And there is a practice in an ancient Japanese practice, and I'm forgetting the actual name of it right now. I'm forgetting the name, so I don't want to misname it. Anyway, it's where they take cups that have broken, vases that have broken, and they put them back together, and they don't try to hide the crack. They don't try to keep us from seeing where it's been shattered, where it's been broken. And the vessel, the cup, wears the crack, wears the fracture, and out in front. And, that's what I came to in this, is that I'm going to wear this as vulnerability. I don't love vulnerability, but radical acceptance ushers in vulnerability. It ushers in an acceptance of we are vulnerable people. We are human beings. We have fallible bodies, and that nothing lasts forever. This is easy enough when we are talking about the mundane things in life, caught in traffic, the teller at the bank is having a bad day, and can't find the thing at the grocery store I wanted, right? Or my internet's out. Okay. But when the circumstances of life become particularly bad, when our circumstances are grave, this is when radical acceptance, I think, becomes particularly difficult. And I'm thinking of a couple of people in particular, but one is a man I met named Carlos Maletta. Carlos Maletta is a man I met at a conference we were both speaking at. And Carlos was, years and years ago, a 19-year-old up-and-coming pro skater, skateboarder. Had a lot of pro interest, but Carlos wanted to go to the Naval Academy. He wanted to become a Navy SEAL. And so he did that. And upon his first mission, he was hit by friendly fire in the back, and he was paralyzed. And Carlos said in his talk, he said, I knew either I go with it or I'm going to be miserable for the rest of my life. He said, I told myself, dude, you can't change it, so you've got to make the best of it. And this is an exercise in radical acceptance. So Carlos decided, he wasn't going to relegate himself to a bed for the rest of his life. He wasn't gonna fall into a depression. So he got busy training as a Paralympian, and he got into wheelchair racing, and he became a Paralympian, won all kinds of titles, gold medals, and that sort of thing. And now in his retirement, he is helping other people who have lost the ability to walk to become Paralympians. And so, this is just an example of how radical acceptance can bring us to new heights. The more we are willing and able to accept the things that have befallen us, the more the doors in life start to open. So what we come to understand, that contrary to what we would say in our our Western way of thinking, radical acceptance is not a surrender, right? Typically, when we talk about acceptance, I have to accept that. There's this understanding that I have to surrender to something, that I'm quitting, that I'm giving up. And again, that's a very Western, very Americanized way of thinking about it. From an Eastern perspective, we're kicking off the bottom, right? When you radically accept something, that's just the first step. It doesn't mean that I'm going to stay here in this place and not do anything about it. It means I'm going to push off the bottom. The first step in Alcoholics Anonymous, as an example, is the understanding that I have a problem, right? That is radical acceptance in its purest form, right? The idea that I have a problem, but we have to make that a step in our very Western, very Americanized culture. The idea that I have a problem is a very difficult, very jagged little pill to swallow. But the thing I say to all my clients is that we don't get our breakthrough without recognizing that we've been in a breakdown, right? And any breakdown, we must find our breakthrough. The way to do that is through radical acceptance. And so you can think of so many heroes of our past, so many people that we may revere, whether it be Martin Luther King, Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, Justice Sotomayor, there's just in Harvey Milk, anyone who has surmounted a breakdown and found a breakthrough. They started where they were, which was radically accepting that we are in this place, right? Martin Luther King, he had to accept that there were people who were going to try and hurt him. There were people who were going to try and jail him, that they were going to, turn dogs and fire hoses on these poor people. He accepted that. He accepted and understood that, he was going to have to put himself in harm's way. He had to learn to accept that in order to get to where he wanted to go, he was going to have to radically accept that there were going to be a lot of trials and a lot of tribulations in his way. And it was through that recognition, through that form of radical acceptance, that the movement that he was able to create in America was born.